All right. Well, welcome to the show. Welcome to today's Stand Up Stand Up. Thank you very much for joining us. As always, I am Jerry Black and I'm your host. And with me today, we have Tim Stevens. Today, we're going to talk about imposter syndrome and maybe some of the benefits of imposter syndrome. As always, we'll end the show by sharing some open source comedy. Thank you very much for joining. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, Tim. So we've talked a lot in this week about the negative side of imposter syndrome, and we've gone through some of the symptoms, seeing it in yourself, seeing it in your team, and trying to address it in your team, building confidence, etc. And it's all been sort of this negative. But you brought up actually even last week when we were talking just sort of on our own about some of the benefits and really some of the people that have in a way benefited from imposter syndrome. And what I want to talk about a little bit is that side of things, and as always trying to take a negative and turn it into a positive, or is there a way we can hack it into a positive, quickly taking some of that negative perception we have of it and make it positive instead of negative, I guess. And so with that, the stuff that I read about, once you said that, I did a little bit of kind of research myself, and it ends up sort of manifesting in those people who have been uber successful in a way that is, well, if they're never satisfied because they always feel like an imposter, then they continue to drive themselves. And even for someone like me, who's I'm not not an Elon Musk or anything along those lines, it's still, if if one of the one of the ways it manifests is, well, things have to be perfect. Well, just short of perfect, but still released, still out in the world, is a really darn good product. And that's kind of how I thought of it, like just from a timeline. I'm a project manager for a big part of my career. From a notes and timelines and the work product that I put out that other people consume, yeah, I could get to it has to be exactly perfect and maybe spend hours on something that really the team would have benefited if they had gotten it sooner. But if I stop just short of that and still ship my product, quote unquote, then that's a darn good release that is really valuable compared to maybe people who don't have that, who don't feel like an imposter, who aren't driven that way, who just kind of go, oh yeah, I don't know, timeline's out. And you're like, but this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong. And it's not as good a product. And so, this was really your insight initially. So let me, kind of turn it over to you and say, how do you see it? Where have you seen it? Talk a little bit about how you perceive it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jerry. The benefits of suffering from imposter syndrome, one of the biggest benefits is, one, it does drive you, constantly drives you to be a better version of you, whether it's at work, at home, as a father, as a mother, sister, brother, whatever it may be. And the reason why is because it is a constant reminder of, internally, am I doing my best? Do I belong where I'm at? And when you begin to ask yourself those questions frequently and consistently, because you're suffering from imposter syndrome and maybe you feel like you don't belong, the other end of those questions should be, okay, what can I do to get a little better? And how can I get better at work? And how can I be a better communicator and a better husband and a better father? And that is, I think, the most effective part of suffering from imposter syndrome. The other thing that I've come across in my time in IT is that, which all of you guys know, that who's listening out there, is IT is constantly evolving, constantly. We are moving, just in my organization, from a very, I would say, standard infrastructure in our data center when it comes to Nexus and Catalyst to an ACI, application-centric infrastructure overlay. Yeah. And granted, that's been around for 5-6 years already. more like 8 or 9. But it is, we're moving in that direction because we're striving to introduce more automation in our day to day. So with that, you have to evolve as a person, which means you also should be thinking about, should I pick up a book and read on ACI so I don't feel like I don't belong in this organization because I've never read into ACI. So it really, yeah, it really should motivate you, and it really should instill more discipline in you, that you should constantly be looking at what you could do better to overcome that imposter syndrome if you feel like you're suffering from it. The other thing I would say is you have to be careful with, because Jerry and I have been baptizing ourselves and talking about imposter syndrome the last couple of weeks. And it really, for me, it's really accelerated and accentuated what I suffer from at times, which we all do, right? But the degree of it, and I was joking with Jerry the other day, I was like, we got to stop this. I mean, this is going on too long. I'm constantly thinking about it because I'm constantly coming up with content. But I go back to the high performers is something I brought up the other day. Those 3 traits that I mentioned, I'll ramble them off here real quick. Is the first one is, as a high performer, you truly believe that you deserve more and better than others, and you're going to work for it. That's the first one. The second one is you don't think you're good enough, which is a paradox of a paradox from the first one. And then the last one is you have the ability to focus. Now, if you've listened to Saban, Coach Saban from Alabama, college coach, what he says, or what he has said, is high performing people do not like mediocre people, and mediocre people do not like high performing people. And that fits in nicely with what we're talking about, because as someone in IT that may think that you're an imposter, the reality is that you're more than likely pushing yourself harder than anybody else or most in the organization. And in that, and because of that, you may feel like you don't belong. Because if you look at your organization, we all have them. We have those rock stars. We have those guys and girls that push themselves constantly, and they're getting better and better over time. And they're humble. In some cases, they're too humble, but they feel like they're imposters. But really, one of the reasons why is because they are amongst mediocre people for the most part, people that are not necessarily pushing themselves. So if you are the minority in those situations, yes, you may feel like you don't belong. And in some cases, I can tell you guys, for our listeners, that is where I find myself, and I have to catch myself and be like, I don't feel like I belong, and I don't feel like I belong in this position. But a lot of it has to do, if I step back, is I am working from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. at times, and I'm really, really pushing myself. So that's my take on benefits.
Yeah, on that, in that, I hadn't thought about it, but the concept of, people that are mediocre don't like people that are high performers. Mm-hmm. Do you think mediocre, like, I guess something that could contribute, that I think I have seen now that you say that, is that mediocre people, or I don't want to put it that way, but people on a team at times can try to bring people that are going faster, trying to excel, trying to push, etc., can pull them down. Yeah. And will do things to try and pull them down. And if you have imposter syndrome and somebody is actively doing that to you, it will absolutely exacerbate the imposter syndrome that you have, because they, they'll start throwing wrenches. Well, why this? Well, what about this? Well, have you thought about that? And it's those things that, sometimes are a lot of the time are red herrings that get thrown at you that have nothing to do with what you're talking about. But because you don't know the answer, all of a sudden now you're like, oh, shit, I don't know that. Oh, I gotta do some more research. I gotta. And it makes it worse. You know what I mean? It makes makes your imposter syndrome worse. So anyways, it's interesting to have that look and that take on it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And one more thing to add on that is, high performers usually get promoted above their peers, typically.
Sure.
And if you take what you just mentioned into account, And then you take that same individual in that situation, you put them in a leadership position in the organization, and they're now leading those same people that have been trying to pull them down. That becomes even more of a challenge for that individual. That becomes even more of a reason to think you're an imposter, because now you are leading your peers, and your peers have never performed or just not interested in performing above and beyond. So now you're dealing with both of those dynamics. Yeah, I'm in a position because I was a high performer, and most, I think, embrace it. They want to go, they want to move up, they want that upward mobility. But now you compound that with your peers that you're now leading. They didn't like you in the first place because you're a rock star, right? And that feeds into the syndrome, and then compound that with now you're leading them, and that's a challenge, right? Because ideally, especially for me, in the past, what I felt like is I expect my team to perform at the level that I perform at. And that's not realistic. I can drive them, motivate them, lead them, give them encouragement, coach them. But the reality is not all of them are going to adopt the same work ethic that I have. And I got to be okay with that. And I got to work with that. So
I think
one more thing. Sorry, Jerry. There's a heavy tax to pay as a high performer.
Yeah, right.
That goes hand in hand with the syndrome, right? That's what comes with it. It's too as well. So go ahead.
And I would say, as the other thing that I will assure you will be a topic of ours at some point in the future is how poorly in IT, and probably across all organizations, but I just see it in IT all the time, is how poorly we prepare people to be managers. And you're exactly right. Normally it's our highest performer, right? The guy that's been killing it. I never thought about the fact that, their peers are probably already resentful of that individual. And even if they're not, even if all of their peers are like, oh, congratulations. I mean, one of the things that we automatically do is we put them back in charge immediately of the people. Like today, you're an individual contributor. Tomorrow, you're in charge. Oh, great. Of who? Oh, all those guys you used to work with, who are now really, unless they're really, really good people, are going to struggle with jealousy and that sort of thing. And now, they're going to, in a lot of ways, immediately try to contribute without really recognizing. I don't think anybody has this in their mind, but they're going to contribute to any imposter syndrome you have going in. Because they're going to, I mean, I've taken management jobs, and the first questions out of people's mouths are the weirdest, obscure. Why is that something you're asking me at this moment? Because they just want to dig. You know what I mean? They just want to pick and
they want to poke. Yeah. They want to poke.
Yeah.
They want to test. Yeah.
That's great.
Guys, that is the price to pay. And that,
that's a
realize
great way
that
the tax.
The syndrome will dissolve if you get comfortable and you get relaxed, right? Because you care less, and you also get very good at the position that you're in.
Yeah.
But you don't grow. So part of the growing pains is, one, it's a little lonely sometimes. It's just the reality of things, whether you're growing at work or growing personally, whatever it is. But two is, do not expect a lot of cheerleaders around you. You're not going to get them. And you have to be okay with that. But I can tell you the effort and the investment that you put in to get where you want to go, whether it's comedy, whether it's your job, and even as a father, that's tough too. And as a mother as well. It's not easy. And that's why there isn't a lot of people doing it. Just think of that, right? So great points, Jerry. I love it.
That's a good one.
Yeah. That's
all
a
right.
good one.
So as always, let's get into some open source comedy. Tim, do you have anything ready today that you want to share?
I have a few things. I'll go with just one though.
All right.
For my listeners out there, I'm sure you've run across someone that speaks in riddles, right? And this individual, they have a skill set that they can talk their ways out of anything. You know that. So we all find ourselves on those incident calls where the network is down, it's been down, and there's really no signs of it coming back up anytime soon. the VP of technology is on that call of the customer and he's looking for blood. We're not going to give him blood because if we give him blood, just like a shark, he's going to go for the kill. So we bring in this individual that speaks in riddles. Now, this isn't public knowledge, but I feel like I can trust all of the viewers out there, all 2 of them that are currently listening, hopefully more in the future. But within 49 minutes, that individual that speaks in riddles, after him joining the call, the whole climate of that call changes. The VP is laughing. There are conversations about weekend plans of sporting events for their kids and movie nights. The chat box of that meeting is filled with emojis and GIFs, and everyone has forgotten somehow that the network is down, it's not coming back up, and that company's bleeding to death. Now, this particular concept was coined by a company that will have to remain anonymous. But if you ever worked with Irene, Bob, and Mary, you probably know who I'm talking about. Screw it, guys, it's IBM.
Irene, Bob, and Mary. It's awesome.
So for my viewers, you're certainly welcome to grab that. That's something I've been working on. My friend Jerry here always preaches to me, don't be shy about continuing to work the same joke because that joke only gets better over years. Gets better over years. So, and Jerry Seinfeld once said that there was a joke he had that he was working on for 10 years, just constantly tuning it and experimenting with it and throwing it out in open mics. And I didn't believe Jerry at the time, but there is a lot of truth in what he says. So maybe I should trust Jerry a little more. Jerry Black, that is.
All right. So I got a couple. We'll see how this plays out. So I have we're talking about imposter syndrome, and I have it bad. I think part of it is because like my kids are always saying things to me like, you're not my real dad. It's like that. and then one of these kids, he's like, he says, I just found out, he's like, you're not my real dad. And I said, yeah, I know. You're an exchange student. You got here a month ago. You're from China. You hardly even speak English. Why would you think I was your real dad? And he's just like, oh, so I'm an imposter now. Now I'm the imposter. Anyways.
Okay.
Nice all right.
Twist.
Well,
I like that. Nice little twist there. Yeah.
So, God, I want to try and do the tag, like, oh, and that was that, but that, that one said, this one said, one of them, I'm really not his dad, but that's because he's an exchange student. He just moved here last month, but he's still and I want to go back and forth and do the tags because I do like that concept.
Yeah.
I think you get good roll of laughter with the tagging. So
absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think that's the show for today. Certainly appreciate all the insight and all that. Now, tomorrow is our final episode on imposter syndrome. I'm very excited in a lot of ways for that to be true. And then
Finally,
and we'll talk a little bit about the topic for next week. So again, thank you very much, Tim, for joining, and we'll talk to everyone tomorrow.
All right. Good stuff. Hey, we should maybe we should start